Welcome to Conspiracy Theories and Cover-Ups. I'm your host, Ben Carter, and in today's episode, we ask a question that once belonged only to science fiction. Has a covert space force been operating above our heads for decades, hidden from the public, financed through black budgets, and armed with technologies far beyond what we're told exists? If there really is a war being fought in orbit, who are the players, and what are they fighting for? The idea of weaponizing space is not new. As early as the 1950s, world governments began to understand that whoever controlled the skies would control the future. The launch of the Soviet satellite Sputnik in the year 1957 sent shockwaves through the United States defense establishment. It was not just a scientific achievement, it was a declaration. Space had become the new strategic frontier. In response, the United States rapidly expanded its own aerospace programs, creating the National Aeronautics and Space Administration in the year 1958, but also doubling down on covert military technologies. Throughout the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union experimented with satellite surveillance, nuclear weapons delivery systems, and space-based tracking. Officially, treaties like the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 banned weapons of mass destruction from orbit. But unofficially, classified programs moved forward. Documents declassified decades later revealed that both nations pursued ambitious projects to dominate the orbital battlefield. By the 1980s, US President Ronald Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, nicknamed Star Wars, by the media openly proposed space-based missile defense systems that critics argued were offensive in nature. Though the program was said to be cancelled, its research did not stop. Military aerospace contractors continued to receive funding for exotic technologies, including directed energy weapons, advanced propulsion systems, and anti-satellite devices. As the Cold War ended, the focus on space did not disappear. In fact, it intensified. With emerging threats from rogue states and the rise of cyber warfare, military planners began to envision the orbital zone not just as a domain of surveillance, but as an active battlefield. In the early 2000s, classified programs under the US Air Force were rumored to include kinetic space weapons, stealth satellites, and rapid deployment platforms capable of striking Earth targets from orbit in minutes. The formal announcement of the United States Space Force in the year 2019 marked a shift from secrecy to something more overt. Yet many researchers and whistleblowers argue that the Space Force was simply a public face for a far older, hidden infrastructure that had been operating in the shadows for decades. According to this view, wars in space may have already begun, only we are not being told about them. What was once considered science fiction may now be unfolding silently above us, outside the view of civilian telescopes and official records. The race to control space may not be coming. It may already be here. Central to the theory of a secret space force are the individuals who have spoken out, claimed insider knowledge, or left behind a trail of classified connections. One of the most cited names in this shadowy narrative is Gary McKinnon, a British hacker who, in the early 2000s, broke into dozens of United States military and space agency computers. McKinnon claimed to have discovered evidence of what he called non-terrestrial officers listed in secret Navy files, as well as fleet-to-fleet transfer logs involving ships that did not appear in any known registry. Though he never downloaded the documents, McKinnon's statements sparked intense speculation. Why would the US government fight for over a decade to extradite him for a non-destructive hack, unless he had seen something they did not want revealed? Another name that often arises is Dr. Carol Rosin, a former spokesperson for Wernher von Braun, the German rocket scientist brought to the United States through Operation Paperclip. According to Rosin, von Braun warned that space would be militarized under false pretenses. First, he said the United States would justify the expansion of weapons in space by citing threats from rogue nations. Then asteroids. Finally, an alien threat, real or fabricated. Von Braun reportedly urged her to prevent the weaponization of space at all costs, fearing it would be used not for defense, but for global control. There are also those from within the United States military and aerospace industry who have made strange claims. Corey Goode, a former self-described intuitive empath, allegedly recruited into a secret space program, described vast fleets of advanced craft, lunar bases and interstellar missions. While Goode's claims are controversial, they align with other whistleblower accounts of breakaway civilizations and compartmentalized space operations unknown to the public or even most of the military. Even mainstream figures like General Stephen Quast, a retired United States Air Force general, have made cryptic statements. In a public lecture in the year 2019, Quast claimed that the United States already had the technology to deliver any human being from any place on planet Earth to any other place in less than an hour. He added that this technology was not theoretical, it already existed. He offered no further clarification. Across these accounts, a pattern emerges: unusual secrecy, advanced capabilities, and a widening gap between the known and the unknown. Whether from hackers, insiders, or high-ranking officials, these voices suggest that something extraordinary may be operating beyond the atmosphere, something that we were never meant to know. Supporters of the secret Space Force theory point to a growing body of alleged evidence, fragmented, often speculative, but surprisingly consistent across multiple sources. One of the most discussed pieces of this puzzle is the existence of advanced space vehicles that do not match any known civilian or military craft. Numerous sightings of large, silent, triangular-shaped aircraft moving slowly across the night sky have been reported for decades. These sightings, often referred to as black triangles, are said to be too large and too maneuverable to be conventional airplanes or satellites. While the public is told they are either misidentified aircraft or weather balloons, believers argue these are anti-gravity vehicles developed in deep black military programs. Another key claim centers around the so-called Solar Warden program. First mentioned by whistleblowers and reinforced by hacked emails and leaked documents, Solar Warden is alleged to be a classified space fleet operated jointly by the United States and other nations, including the United Kingdom and Australia. The fleet supposedly includes massive carriers, support craft, and defensive satellites, all orbiting Earth or stationed in deep space. Proponents claim it has existed since at least the 1980s, and is part of a breakaway military infrastructure that operates entirely outside of public knowledge or congressional oversight. Some of the most compelling material comes from patents quietly filed by the United States Navy in recent years. In 2019, a series of aerospace patents attributed to Navy engineer Dr. Salvatore Pais surfaced online. These included concepts for high-frequency gravitational wave generators, compact fusion reactors, and hybrid aerospace underwater craft capable of extreme speeds and sudden directional shifts. The documents describe technology so advanced that it borders on science fiction. Although the Navy initially downplayed the patents, it later admitted that the inventions were real and funded for development under high-priority projects. Satellite behavior has also raised questions. Analysts have observed unusual patterns in some classified United States satellites, including erratic movements, sudden course changes, and what appear to be surveillance or defensive maneuvers. These satellites are sometimes tracked by amateur astronomers who report them disappearing from orbit without explanation. If these observations are accurate, it suggests a level of orbital agility not publicly acknowledged by any nation. Collectively, these clues, triangular crafts, leaked documents, high-tech patents, and satellite anomalies, paint a picture of something far more complex than traditional space programs. They suggest the presence of infrastructure, operations, and technology that have never been disclosed to the public. And if these systems are real, the question is no longer whether we are in a space race, but whether that race has already become a war. When examining the claims surrounding a secret space force, it becomes essential to evaluate the evidence with scrutiny. While much of the alleged proof is circumstantial or based on witness testimony, some materials do lend themselves to deeper analysis. Take, for instance, the patents attributed to Dr. Salvatore Pais. His designs for hybrid aerospace and underwater craft, inertial mass reduction devices, and compact nuclear fusion reactors were filed with the United States Patent Office under official Navy documentation. These patents are publicly available and show clear intent to pursue revolutionary propulsion systems. Although the patents themselves do not confirm that such technologies have been fully developed or deployed, the fact that they were filed and defended in peer review suggests that the science was taken seriously, at least within certain military research circles. Equally significant are the statements made by retired military officials, especially those with access to classified aerospace projects. General Stephen Quast's claim that point-to-point transport anywhere on Earth is already achievable is not an offhand comment. In military contexts, language is typically guarded and precise. For a general to publicly state that this technology exists implies either an extraordinary development or a calculated signal to potential adversaries. Analysts have debated whether such statements are forms of psychological deterrence or subtle disclosures hidden in plain sight. Tracking data from satellites also contributes to the discussion. Independent researchers who monitor orbital paths have documented irregular movements from satellites that are registered under classified payloads. In some cases, objects have changed orbits with a level of control and responsiveness that defies conventional propulsion methods. While governments rarely comment on classified satellite behavior, these anomalies remain unexplained. If such maneuvers are being performed intentionally, it implies the use of propulsion systems that have not been made public. The Solar Warden theory also gained traction when alleged documents surfaced through Freedom of Information Act requests and leaked files, some of which reference space-based defense initiatives dating back to the 1980s. While no document explicitly confirms a program named Solar Warden, the language used in these declassified memos, such as deep space operations and extraterrestrial threat preparedness, has been interpreted by some researchers as indirect validation. There is also the matter of budget. The United States Department of Defense has long maintained a category of spending known as black budget funding. These allocations are not subject to traditional oversight or public disclosure. Estimates suggest that tens of billions of dollars disappear annually into these programs. When added up over decades, this represents trillions of dollars that could fund entire fleets, bases, and experimental technologies, all without public accountability. Though conclusive proof remains elusive, the mosaic formed by these patents, statements, orbital data, and financial irregularities raises a fundamental question. If the truth about space operations is still being hidden, how far ahead is that reality from what the public has been allowed to see? Critics of the secret Space Force theory argue that many of the claims rely on speculation, misinterpretation, or outright fabrication. They point out that extraordinary statements, particularly those made by self-described whistleblowers, often lack supporting documentation or verifiable evidence. Figures like Corey Goode and others have been challenged on the credibility of their accounts, with skeptics noting inconsistencies in their timelines, vague sourcing, and lack of corroboration from independent insiders. Critics argue that without physical proof, such as images, footage, or verifiable documents, these narratives remain unsubstantiated. In the case of Gary McKinnon, skeptics emphasize that although he claimed to find evidence of non-terrestrial officers and unknown space fleets, he never produced actual files. No screenshots, downloads, or saved documents were ever shown. Government officials stated that his hack caused significant damage, but never confirmed the existence of the files he described. To critics, this lack of hard evidence undermines the claim's significance and casts doubt on whether the files ever existed in the first place. The Salvatore Pais patents, while real, have also been questioned. Several physicists and engineers have reviewed the proposals and concluded that many of the concepts lack practical feasibility. Some of the technologies, such as the high-frequency gravitational wave generator, are viewed as theoretically interesting but currently impossible to build with existing materials or energy sources. These experts argue that filing a patent does not necessarily mean the device works, only that someone had a novel idea. From this perspective, the patents are not proof of a functioning secret program, but examples of speculative military research. The behavior of satellites is also a point of contention. Detractors argue that many of the observed anomalies can be explained by routine maneuvers, such as repositioning or orbital decay correction. The lack of transparency surrounding classified satellites, they say, should not automatically imply exotic technology. The absence of information does not prove the presence of secret weapons or spacecraft. It may simply reflect the normal secrecy of intelligence-gathering assets. Even the establishment of the United States Space Force is viewed by some as more symbolic than strategic. According to critics, its creation reflects a bureaucratic reshuffling of existing Air Force space operations under a new banner, rather than a radical shift in capability. The Space Force may be more about organizational clarity than disclosure of hidden programs. Ultimately, skeptics emphasize the importance of applying rigorous standards of evidence. Without verifiable data, they argue, the theory of a covert space war remains a narrative driven by speculation, not substantiated fact. For them, the lack of transparency is not proof of a conspiracy, but a symptom of the national security apparatus that has always surrounded military space programs. The possibility of a secret space force extends beyond military implications. If true, it reshapes our understanding of geopolitics, science, and power itself. A covert fleet of spacefaring craft developed in isolation from public accountability would represent not only a leap in technological achievement, but also a fundamental shift in who controls humanity's future. Space is not just a strategic frontier, it is a new arena of dominance. And in this arena, the boundaries between nations, corporations, and secret factions may already be blurred. If an elite group has access to propulsion systems that can bypass conventional fuel limitations, or weapons that can operate without sound or visible trace, then the balance of power on Earth is no longer determined by tanks, missiles, or economies. It is determined by who controls space. The implications for national sovereignty are profound. Governments that operate without full awareness of these systems may no longer be the highest authority within their own borders. In this context, presidents, prime ministers, and generals could become figureheads, while real decisions are made by agencies or programs buried in classified compartments. Culturally, the impact is just as significant. Throughout history, public imagination has looked to the skies with wonder, mystery, and hope. The stars have always represented the future. If our species has already reached that future without us knowing, if bases exist on the moon, or if Earth is orbited by vehicles far beyond our technological understanding, then the narrative of progress we have been told is incomplete. Civilization may be decades or centuries more advanced than what is publicly acknowledged. Technologically, the secrecy may have stifled innovation. If anti-gravity systems or zero-point energy sources have been developed in secret, their absence from public science has limited our potential. We continue to rely on fossil fuels, outdated propulsion, and vulnerable infrastructure, while unknown systems operate silently above us. The compartmentalization of such knowledge may benefit the few, but deprives the many of progress in transportation, medicine, energy, and more. Psychologically, the very idea of a hidden space war suggests that reality itself is filtered. It raises questions about how much of what we believe to be true is managed, curated, or deliberately obscured. The existence of a secret space force would not simply be a military fact. It would be a revelation that demands we rethink our place in the universe. It would force us to ask, what else has been kept from us, and why? Mainstream media has rarely addressed the idea of a secret space force directly, but its influence can be seen in how space-related developments are framed and filtered. Official coverage of space militarization tends to focus on surface-level stories. Budget announcements, satellite launches, or geopolitical concerns about nations like China or Russia developing anti-satellite weapons. These narratives reinforce the idea that space is still a contested but largely unexplored domain, where humanity is just beginning to expand. Yet beneath these headlines, alternative voices have pushed a very different story, one in which global powers have already colonized the orbital realm in secret. When the United States Space Force was announced in the year 2019, most major outlets treated it as a political novelty. Late-night talk shows turned it into a punchline. News anchors questioned its necessity. Few asked whether it might represent the unveiling of something that had long been hidden. The casual tone of coverage contrasted sharply with the language used by military officials, who repeatedly emphasized space as a war-fighting domain and stressed the importance of dominance beyond Earth's atmosphere. In the years since, public interest in secret space programs has grown, not because of mainstream reporting, but because of online communities, leaked documents, and independent researchers. Podcasts, blogs, and documentaries have kept the conversation alive, building networks of speculation and pattern recognition. While traditional news organizations dismiss these efforts as fringe or conspiratorial, they have collectively shaped a new kind of media landscape, one in which public trust often shifts toward the unofficial. Hollywood has also played a role in normalizing the concept of advanced off-planet warfare. From films like Elysium and Interstellar to television series like The Expanse, the idea of human conflict extending into space has become familiar. Critics argue that such portrayals serve a dual purpose: to entertain and to acclimate the public to the idea that space is already militarized. The repeated imagery of space fleets, orbital weapons, and secret bases blurs the line between fiction and reality. Over time, what once seemed impossible becomes psychologically acceptable. Social media algorithms further amplify this dynamic. Platforms reward engagement, and few topics are as engaging as hidden technology and cosmic secrets. Videos about secret space fleets, advanced propulsion, or lunar facilities often rack up millions of views. Even when labeled as speculation, these stories reach wide audiences, generating a feedback loop of curiosity and belief. The conspiracy, if it exists, may not just be in the operations themselves, but in how they are hidden in plain sight. Through mockery, distraction, and selective coverage, the media may have played an active role in keeping the public focused on the sky, without ever really looking at what's in it. Beyond the mainstream discussion lies a more fringe, speculative layer of the secret Space Force theory, one that stretches the limits of what most consider possible, yet continues to attract serious attention in alternative circles. These theories suggest that not only are we operating advanced spacecraft in Earth's orbit, but that humanity may already be present far beyond it, on the Moon, Mars, and even beyond the solar system. According to some whistleblowers and classified sources, these missions are not exploratory. They are strategic, and the enemies involved may not be terrestrial. One of the more provocative claims is that the United States, along with allied nations, has been operating a fleet under the Solar Warden program since at least the early 1980s. This fleet, according to insiders, includes massive carrier-class vessels capable of interplanetary travel, as well as escort craft and support stations in deep space. The mission of Solar Warden, they say, is to monitor extraterrestrial activity near Earth and prevent unauthorized incursions into the planet's airspace. In this narrative, space is not just a place of exploration, it is a guarded border. Some of these theories go even further. They suggest that treaties have already been made between human factions and non-human entities, and that certain technologies, such as anti-gravity, zero-point energy, or even time manipulation, have been traded in exchange for biological or strategic resources. These claims, while unconfirmed, echo long-standing narratives in the world of alien abduction reports, underground base theories, and alleged interstellar contact. Another persistent thread involves lunar activity. Multiple former military and intelligence personnel have claimed that the Moon is not a dead rock, but a strategic outpost. According to these accounts, installations exist on the far side of the Moon, shielded from Earth-based observation. These are said to be operated either by humans alone or in cooperation with extraterrestrial beings. Apollo astronauts, too, are occasionally cited in these theories, with vague statements and brief radio silence during certain missions pointed to as signs of undisclosed encounters. There is also speculation surrounding Mars. Stories persist that a small human presence has already been established there, not through the publicly acknowledged Mars rovers or future colonization plans, but through covert teleportation or advanced propulsion systems hidden from public science. Some insiders claim these missions began as early as the 1980s, using technology developed in black projects that never saw the light of day. While these ideas are widely rejected by mainstream institutions, their persistence is notable. They form part of a growing mythology, one in which Earth is not the center of human activity, but only the surface layer of a much deeper, more secretive expansion. Whether fact, disinformation, or something in between, these fringe theories continue to shape how people think about space, secrecy, and who really controls the final frontier. If the theory of a secret space force is true, whether in part or in full, it challenges more than just our understanding of military power. It redefines the boundaries of human achievement, the scope of government secrecy, and the nature of the reality we inhabit. For decades, the public has been presented with a linear story of space exploration. Rockets launched, satellites deployed, astronauts trained, and missions announced. But beneath this surface narrative may lie another timeline, one shaped by hidden discoveries, classified breakthroughs, and covert operations that never made the headlines. The implications of such a revelation are staggering. It would mean that an entire infrastructure has been built beyond public awareness, that humanity, or at least a select few, may already be engaging in activities beyond our planet with technologies the rest of us can scarcely imagine. It would suggest that a breakaway civilization exists within our own, a parallel system with its own rules, its own weapons, and its own goals. This leads to one final question. If such a space force exists, who is it accountable to? Is it controlled by elected officials, or has it become something autonomous, answering only to itself? The compartmentalization of intelligence, funding through black budgets, and the rise of corporate defense contractors have all created a system where oversight is difficult, if not impossible. The deeper the secrecy, the less control the public has over the decisions being made in its name. Some argue that secrecy is necessary, that the threats beyond Earth, be they strategic, technological, or even extraterrestrial, require silence. But others counter that power without accountability is a threat in itself. That in shielding the truth, we risk allowing an invisible empire to rise, one that shapes not just policy, but perception, one that operates without the burden of consent. The secret space force, if it exists, is not just a weapon, it is a mirror. It reflects the extent to which truth can be hidden, progress can be concealed, and reality can be shaped not by evidence, but by silence. It forces us to confront not only what is happening above us, but what is being kept from us here below. Thanks for listening. This has been another episode of Conspiracy Theories and Cover-Ups. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to support the show, gain access to bonus content, and unlock our entire library of video podcasts, subscribe to the Forbidden Knowledge Network on Patreon. Subscribe now.